If you are trying to navigate hormone replacement therapy, let's just be honest, the sheer volume of regimens and schedules and medical terminology, it can feel a bit like trying to crack a safe without having the combination.
Oh, absolutely. It's notoriously dense.
Right, like you hear all these clicks, right? Patches, pills, cyclical, continuous, unopposed, but nothing is actually opening the door to a clear understanding of what you should be taking and when you should take it.
And the stakes are incredibly high here. I mean, we are talking about your daily comfort, your long-term health, and literally manipulating the fundamental chemical messengers in your body.
Yeah, exactly.
Patients just want the right combination to make the menopausal symptoms stop. But the medical guidance often feels like, well, like a foreign language.
Which is exactly why today's deep dive is entirely dedicated to translating that language. We want to find that exact combination for you.
Yes, we do.
And we're pulling from a really detailed stack of clinical sources today, the official NHS guidelines, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, which is commonly known as NICE-N, and the comprehensive 2020 consensus statements from the British Menopause Society.
Yeah, and those sources, I mean, they represent the absolute heavy hitters of modern medical guidance.
The ultimate rule books, basically.
Right. They synthesize decades of clinical trials and real-world pharmacological data to give doctors this very strict, evidence-based roadmap for prescribing.
So our mission today is to take that roadmap and clear up the confusion around the core focus of this deep dive, which is what exactly is the difference between sequential HRT, which is sometimes called cyclical, and continuous combined HRT.
That is the big question.
We're going to map out exactly why these two entirely different paths exist, who they're designed for, and how they bridge that biological transition through menopause.
Because understanding which of those two paths you're on, it completely changes your expectations for the treatment. I mean, the side effects, the bleeding patterns, the long-term risks, they all hinge on whether you are taking that sequential route or the continuous route.
Okay, so let's unpack this. To really grasp the difference between the two schedules, I feel like we need a solid analogy here.
I love a good analogy.
We're going to scrap the usual textbook explanations and just think of HRT like a car's engine. So our listeners probably already know that estrogen is the primary driver for symptom relief.
Right, it's the main event.
Yeah, it's the fuel that treats the vasomotor symptoms, like the hot flushes. It stabilizes the mood swings and crucially protects bone density. So estrogen is basically the accelerator pedal.
And applying that accelerator is vital because, well, you are replacing what the ovaries are no longer producing at sufficient levels.
Makes sense.
But here is the critical medical caveat that literally drives all HRT guidelines. If a patient who still has her uterus takes what we call unopposed estrogen.
Meaning just the accelerator.
Exactly. Pressing the accelerator all by itself. It causes the lining of the womb, the endometrium, to proliferate and thicken really rapidly.
Okay, I want to push back on that slightly just to clarify the mechanics for everyone listening. Cell growth happens all over the body, right? So why is this specific thickening in the womb such an alarming problem for doctors?
Because unregulated cellular proliferation in the endometrium, it frequently leads to a condition called endometrial hyperplasia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the cells aren't just growing, they're actually mutating. Hyperplasia is a direct precursor to endometrial cancer.
Wow.
The clinical data on this is absolute. You cannot continuously press the estrogen accelerator without eventually crashing the vehicle.
Right.
So to prevent that runaway cell growth, a second hormone, or progestogen, must be added to act as a braking system. We call this endometrial protection.
Okay, so estrogen is the accelerator driving the relief and the cell growth, and progestogen is the braking system keeping that growth safely in check.
What's fascinating here is that we have hard, undeniable clinical data proving exactly how effective that braking system is.
Like actual numbers.
Oh, yeah. The sources reference a landmark study called the PPI trial. That's the postmenopausal estrogen progestin interventions trial.
Okay.
It was a massive 3-year study tracking hundreds of women. And the researchers found that the group taking unopposed estrogen, so just the accelerator, had over a 30% incidence of developing that dangerous precancerous hyperplasia.
Wait, 30%? That is a staggering failure rate for a medical intervention.
It really was. It was a huge wake-up call for the medical community. But when they looked at the group of women who had the progestogen braking system added to their daily regimen, the results were incredibly stark.
What happened?
The risk of hyperplasia was completely neutralized. It dropped right back down to 0%, literally matching the women who were just taking a sugar pill placebo.
Oh, wow, down to zero. That is a phenomenal biological counterbalance. So the progestogen literally arrests the cellular division that the estrogen is trying to promote. Exactly.
Now, just to be totally clear for anyone listening, if you have had a hysterectomy and you no longer have a uterus, you don't have an endometrium to worry about, right?
That is a very vital distinction. Women without a uterus do not need the braking system at all. They can safely take estrogen-only HRT.
Got it.
But for anyone with an intact uterus, pairing the accelerator with the brakes is absolutely non-negotiable.
Okay, so we have our two components, the estrogen accelerator and the progestogen brakes. Now we arrive at the central question of our deep dive. How do doctors actually apply these to a woman whose body is still trying to run its own natural, albeit erratic, engine?
Yes, and this brings us to sequential HRT,
Right.
also known in the literature as cyclical HRT. This specific regimen is engineered for perimenopausal women.
And perimenopausal means?
Medically, that defines women who are still having periods, or whose last natural period was less than 12 months ago. Their ovaries haven't completely shut down yet, they're basically sputtering.
Like an engine misfiring.
Exactly. They still produce their own erratic surges of hormones. So how does sequential HRT navigate an engine that is sputtering and surging on its own like that?
Well, in its sequential regimen, the patient takes the estrogen every single day. The accelerator is constantly pressed to establish a baseline of symptom relief.
Okay.
But the progestogen, the brakes, is only applied for a very specific window of time. Usually, doctors prescribe it for 10 to 14 days out of a standard 28-day cycle.
And what happens physiologically when they stop taking the progestogen after those 14 days?
That intentional sudden drop in the progestogen level, it mimics the body's natural luteal phase ending. The sudden absence of the hormone strips the structural support from the endometrial lining, which causes the uterus to shed it.
I see.
The result is a monthly withdrawal bleed. It usually comes a few days after the progestogen phase ends. It is essentially a medically induced clearing of the engine, so to speak.
I have to admit some confusion here, and I'm sure most listeners dealing with perimenopause are thinking the exact same thing right now.
What's that?
Well, if the goal is to stabilize the body, why on earth would we intentionally trigger a withdrawal bleed every single month? Like, most women want to be done with bleeding entirely.
Oh, absolutely.
So if we know they need the braking system to prevent cancer, why not just give them both hormones every day from the very beginning and just skip the bleeding?
It is a highly logical question. I mean, it really is. But it fundamentally ignores the body's natural physiology during perimenopause.
How so?
Because those sputtering ovaries are still occasionally producing their own massive surges of endogenous estrogen, which endocrinologists call follicular activity. Giving a constant daily dose of the progestogen braking system clashes violently with the body's internal rhythm.
Oh, it's like trying to slam on the emergency brake while the engine is randomly revving itself.
That captures the mechanical conflict perfectly. If you try to force continuous HRT onto a perimenopausal woman too early, her natural ovarian surges will overpower the steady medication.
And what happens then?
The result is highly erratic, unpredictable, and often very heavy breakthrough bleeding. Sequential HRT, by deliberately scheduling that 14-day break in the progestogen, it keeps the bleeding organized. It works in tandem with the fluctuating body rather than trying to rigidly suppress it.
That makes total sense. It acts as a bridge, giving the body a predictable rhythm while the natural engine slowly powers down.
Exactly, a bridge.
But reading through the NICE guidelines, there is a really crucial safety warning about this sequential bridge. The timing of that progestogen window is definitely not just a casual suggestion.
No, it is an absolute non-negotiable requirement. The guidelines state very clearly that taking the progestogen for less than 10 days a month fails to fully clear the lining.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the estrogen receptors in the uterus need a solid 10 to 14 days of constant exposure to the progestogen to fully arrest their cell division. The sources note that skimping on this window can actually increase the risk of endometrial cancer threefold after just a few months of use.
Threefold. So you really have to hold the brakes down for the full 2 weeks to safely clear the system.
Yes, you do.
And there's also a strict time limit on how long a patient should stay on this sequential bridge, correct?
That's right. The British Menopause Society data indicates that relying on sequential HRT for more than 5 years, or continuing it beyond the age of 54, begins to slightly elevate the risk of endometrial cancer compared to non-users.
Okay, so it's temporary.
Exactly. The bridge is incredibly effective for managing perimenopause, but it is fundamentally a temporary measure. It is not the final destination.
Which naturally leads us to what happens on the other side of that bridge. Eventually the sputtering stops, the natural ovarian engine completely quiets down.
Right.
And once the body's internal cycle stops fighting the external medication, the regimen shifts to the ultimate destination, which is continuous combined HRT.
And this is the regimen strictly reserved for postmenopausal women. Medically, that means a woman whose natural engine has been silent for over 1 full year, or a patient who has safely completed her 5-year transit across the sequential bridge.
So how does the pharmacology shift in this stage?
Well, in continuous combined HRT, both the estrogen accelerator and the progestogen braking system are engaged every single day.
Every day.
Yeah, there are no 14-day windows. There are no intentional drops in hormone levels.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Because you are applying that daily continuous progestogen brake, the lining of the womb never receives the chemical signal to shed.
That's the beauty of it.
It stays incredibly thin and atrophic. So the result is a completely bleed-free regimen. No more monthly withdrawal bleeds. The body finally achieves a smooth, steady cruising speed.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that steady cruising speed represents a profoundly protective medical state. When you supply daily, uninterrupted progestogen, you are constantly downregulating the estrogen receptors in the endometrium.
They just shut down.
Right, the cells simply cannot multiply.
I was looking through the British Menopause Society's 2020 consensus statements, and the data on this specific protective state completely blew my mind. There is an incredible paradigm shift regarding continuous combined HRT and overall cancer risk.
The statistics are undeniably reassuring, honestly. Continuous combined HRT doesn't just protect the womb from the supplemental estrogen you're taking.
Right.
The constant cellular suppression actually pushes the risk of endometrial cancer lower than the baseline risk of women who do not take HRT at all.
Let that sink in for a moment for anyone listening. By taking these hormones continuously every single day, your actual risk of developing womb cancer is lower than if you were just relying on your body's natural, unmedicated postmenopausal state.
It is scientifically the safest long-term option for women over 54.
That's wild.
The daily progestogen creates a highly controlled hostile environment for cancer cells in the uterus, all while allowing the rest of the body to safely absorb the cardiovascular, cognitive, and bone density benefits of the daily estrogen.
I mean, a smooth, steady cruising speed with built-in cancer protection sounds like the holy grail of medicine.
It really does.
But we have to address the reality of getting there. Because transitioning between the sequential bridge and the continuous destination, or even just starting HRT for the first time, is rarely seamless.
No, it's not.
The engine occasionally sputters, the brakes sometimes squeal, and this brings us to the biggest hurdle patients face in the real world.
Yeah, the clinical term for it is unscheduled bleeding. And it is the primary reason women get frustrated, assume the medication is harming them, and then just completely abandon their HRT.
The clinical data from the NHS Pathways states it happens to roughly 40% of women in the first 3 to 6 months of starting either therapy.
40%.
40%. That isn't just a rare side effect, that is almost a coin toss.
And yet, it is an entirely expected physiological response. On the sequential HRT regimen, unscheduled bleeding means experiencing heavy or prolonged bleeding completely outside of that planned monthly withdrawal window.
And on continuous.
On the continuous HRT regimen, it means any spotting or bleeding that persists beyond the first 6 months of daily treatment.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? If you have just started a continuous daily patch and you experience some unexpected spotting in month 2, is your regimen failing? Like, is it time to just throw the medication in the trash?
Absolutely not. The body's estrogen receptors are actively recalibrating to an entirely new hormonal baseline.
It's an adjustment period.
Yes. It takes time for the endometrium to fully thin out and atrophy under the new daily braking system. Spotting in those early months is a known adjustment phase, not a failure of the medication.
But what if it doesn't settle down? Let's say a listener hits the 6-month mark and the spotting is still happening, or it's genuinely heavy and disruptive. Does a patient just have to grit her teeth and live with it?
No, and this is where the modern clinical pathways become incredibly sophisticated. The sources detail specific protocols for when this happens. I was reviewing the GIRFT guidelines.
Which stands for getting it right, first time right.
It's a major NHS national initiative designed to eliminate outdated or ineffective variations in patient care. The GIRFT pathways for menopause are super illuminating.
What do they say?
Well, if bleeding persists, they don't accept it as normal. It usually indicates a mechanical imbalance. Basically, the estrogen accelerator is slightly overpowering the progestogen braking system.
So the estrogen is building the lining just a bit faster than the progestogen can suppress it.
Right.
So following the logic here, the doctor just needs to upgrade the braking system.
Precisely the approach. The GIRFT guidelines recommend specific dose adjustments. For instance, if a patient is taking 100 milligrams of oral micronized progesterone.
And just to define micronized for our listeners, that means the progesterone molecules have been physically milled down into microscopic particles to vastly improve how well the gut absorbs them compared to older synthetic progestins.
Spot on. So if they are on 100 milligrams, the doctor might simply increase that dose to 200 milligrams.
But what if increasing the oral dose causes systemic side effects? I mean, not everyone's liver processes oral hormones the same way, which can lead to drowsiness or mood changes, right?
That is exactly why the GRFT guidelines heavily feature the 52 milligram levonorgestrel intrauterine system, which most people know as the Mirena coil.
Ah, the Mirena.
Yes. In the realm of endometrial protection, it is a massive game changer.
I really want to focus on this because it essentially solves this systemic issue entirely. Instead of taking a progestogen pill that has to survive your stomach acid, process through your liver, enter your bloodstream, and hopefully make its way to your uterus in a high enough concentration to act as a brake.
Right. The Mirena coil bypasses all of that. It is inserted directly into the womb. It literally parks the braking system right at the wheels.
I love that visual.
It slowly releases a continuous, highly localized dose of levonorgestrel, which is a very potent progestogen, directly onto the endometrial lining 24 hours a day for up to 5 years.
And because it's localized, the amount of hormone that actually enters the bloodstream is minimal,
That's
right?
Very minimal.
Which drastically reduces those systemic side effects, like the mood drops or the severe grogginess that some women experience with oral pills.
Yes. And this raises an important question about how we view treatment failure. If a patient is suffering from side effects or persistent bleeding on an oral pill, the HRT itself hasn't failed. The delivery method has.
That's a great point.
The localized constant suppression from the Mirena coil guarantees the lining stays razor thin, making it incredibly effective at stopping that unscheduled bleeding.
And it vastly simplifies the daily logistics for the patient, too. Like, if a listener has the Mirena coil installed to handle all the braking, their continuous combined regimen is basically half finished.
Exactly.
All they have to do is apply a daily transdermal estrogen patch or rub on some estrogen gel to supply the accelerator, and their entire HRT protocol is complete.
The core takeaway from these comprehensive NHS and VMS guidelines is the sheer adaptability of the treatments. You are never locked into a single failing method. If the oral route causes bleeding, doctors pivot to transdermal patches. If patches don't absorb well, they pivot to gels and intrauterine devices. The medical toolkit is deep enough to find the exact combination that works for your specific metabolism.
You just have to be willing to go back to the doctor for a few tune-ups. You know, the very first prescription is rarely the final perfect protocol.
It requires patience and, honestly, a willingness to communicate exactly what your body is doing during that transition phase.
So to bring all of this dense medical guidance together and kind of summarize our deep dive into the sources today, if you have a uterus, HRT fundamentally requires two hormones acting in concert.
Yes.
Estrogen provides the vital relief and acts as the accelerator, while progestogen provides mandatory protection, acting as the brakes against cell mutation.
And sequential HRT serves as the essential bridge during those chaotic perimenopausal years. It utilizes a planned, monthly withdrawal bleed to safely manage the body's erratic, natural hormone fluctuations without constantly fighting them.
And continuous combined HRT is the ultimate long-term destination for the postmenopausal years. It provides a steady, daily state of both hormones, keeping the uterine lining permanently thin, protected, and completely bleed-free.
By understanding the deep physiological differences between these two regimens, patients are protected from information overload. I mean, when you understand the why behind the specific schedule your doctor has chosen, the anxiety surrounding the treatment drops significantly.
You are empowered to sit in that clinic and know exactly what phase of the journey you're on and why you really shouldn't panic if you experience a little turbulence while your body's engine recalibrates.
Exactly.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final paradigm shift to ponder, kind of building on what we uncovered in the sources today.
You're talking about the data regarding cancer reduction, right?
Yes, exactly. We learned from the British Menopause Society statistics that continuous combined HRT doesn't just return a woman to her baseline risk level.
Yeah.
It actively suppresses cellular mutations so effectively that it lowers the risk of endometrial cancer compared to not taking any HRT at all.
Which is incredible.
It is, because society usually views the aging process as, natural, and we tend to view medical intervention as just managing decay.
Right. A perspective of merely trying to slow down the inevitable decline.
Exactly. But does this specific, heavily documented protective effect reframe how we should look at postmenopausal HRT entirely? I mean, if this carefully balanced regimen doesn't just manage hot flushes, but actively acts as a biological armor against cancer, could we one day view continuous HRT not just as a symptom reliever, but as a proactive, life-extending upgrade to the human body's original design? It's definitely something for you to ponder long after this deep dive ends.